Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ask the Educator podcast. This is Kevin Anderson, your host, and with me, as usual, Adam Okada, our co-host. For this episode, it was following up on a special edition of the international webinar featuring our very own Cheron Rojo. And I don't want to spoil the amazing introduction that was done on the webinar. So we will let our listeners who decide to go back and check out that webinar, which I definitely recommend you do. There's a lot of details in there and a lot of great photos that we cannot cover here in a podcast. So I definitely recommend you go back through the Healthmark Academy website and check out the international webinar with Cheron Rojo. Now, this one, Cheron, welcome back to the show and great
Thank
job as
you.
always on the webinar. Um, this one was it seems like it doesn't do it justice to say it was about insulation testing, but why don't you kind of tee it up for us, Sharon? You can share a little bit about um, the personal story you shared and how that contributed to you launching this study and all of this stuff. And I mean, you're just the best to explain it anyway. So take it away.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, this presentation was basically a little bit of three, but two main presentations that I've given in the last few years with two different studies. So it was kind of nice putting the two together to really see and compare. I mean, I knew the difference, obviously, because I did the studies, but to see it first, you go over those numbers with the 2019 study into the 21-22 was like, wow, the numbers were just as bad. So it really didn't matter how many hospitals I did, how many states I did. It just didn't matter. And I kind of knew that, but when I started building the presentation, it was like so obvious. And then I decided, which I don't know if it was a good thing or not, normally when you present you tell your story whatever, and at the end you share like a personal story or something, and I decided to do it differently. I decided to talk about the personal story first. Then I thought, oh my God, I'm crying, like how am I even gonna like gather my emotions to be able to finish the presentation,
Yeah.
and talked about my daughter and her near miss experience, which a lot of people have heard about, but I decided to go into more detail about the other things that happened during that time that
Right.
really triggered me to do the first study, which then triggered me to do the second study. So I don't know if that's kind of an overall
Mhm.
uh, feel for what I presented, but yeah, that's kind of it. It was just putting the studies together and talking about that near miss in more detail.
Yeah. And it was really powerful. So if you get a chance, go check that story out because it really was. I think what it does is it makes the issues hit home in a way that I don't think we usually get that during education, where somebody can tell us what the Amy standards say. That's a very common thing that happens during a presentation. But when you shared like what you were feeling and the emotions you went through when you had to make a decision about a hospital that was not testing laparoscopic instruments, and then your daughter having to go in for surgery, like that really makes it impactful and really makes it hit home. So I appreciate you sharing that story about it. But what are some of the issues that can happen with insulation? I mean, I think most people think, oh, it's just my laparoscopic instruments, my insulated laparoscopic instruments, and that's all I need to test. But are there other things that we need to look at as well?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one, which is the highest failure rate, was the insulated bipolar forceps. And that could include an Adson to a 7 3/4, which is what I talked about. Because, it's what I see is everybody will say, well, they get damaged, so we're going to take them out of this heavy ortho tray and we're going to pill pouch them separately because it's going to save it. And then it gets used in OR, toss it around, then it gets tossed with the other instruments back into the same tray you took it out. Then it's staged incorrectly. That's thrown in so we don't lose it. You still have the damage. So what I really feel is that your bipolar insulated item or forceps need to be evaluated. They need to be tested. They need to be looked at. And I'm talking the whole process. I'm talking the backup, which I showed pictures of that. And that's one instrument that when I bring it up, they're like, oh, really? And
Mm.
then I go and show them, and then if the thing is so damn bad that I don't even want to test it because I'm going to shock myself. That's how bad it is. Another thing is keeping in mind that insulated items could be, I'm trying to remember the name, Adam, you have to help me. The insulated scissors, the ones that were used for neuro, they're really long. Remember those? I forgot what they were called, but those are insulated. Those aren't being
Oh,
tested. Cables and
Yeah.
cords is another one. So
mm-hmm.
that, and then of course the right cleaning brushes.
Tenaculums.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tenacum, and then also the
Yeah.
cleaning brushes
Vaginal
because you,
speculums, all kinds of things.
yeah,
Yeah.
you assume that we're using soft bristle brushes, and the manager will tell me, yeah, we don't use metal brushes because blah 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 blah. Then I go back there, open a drawer, or someone's hiding it into a fanny pack that they shouldn't be having, and here's all these metal brushes that they got maybe at a vendor show for free, and they're using them on insulated devices or grounding Bovie pads from the OR, which I showed pictures of that. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that kind of answers your question, but it's kind of a lot. There's a lot with this.
There really is, and I think that you touched on a lot of it. Obviously, like I said in the webinar, you go into more detail, and I definitely recommend people check that out because it's recording a lot of this stuff you had done at the expos, and not everyone has the opportunity to go see these presentations at the annual conference and expo. And that's why I love doing these things on the international webinar, make sure it's more accessible to people. But one of the things that struck me about this story is that it reminds me of my personal experience in the sense that I came from OR, started managing SPD, and learned about insulation testing and found out that we weren't doing it at all, like zero insulation testing. And it started making me think of all the different incidences when patients came back after surgeries that I had been a part of, a simple gallbladder removal and the patient's coming back and now we have to open them up, things like that. Um,
That's
and
when I
this is
first met
such
you,
a,
Kevin, I think,
yeah,
is that's when I
yeah.
first got introduced to you,
Yeah, yeah.
actually.
It's when you were
Yeah.
in our department
Yeah.
doing part of your study. And that was actually after we had implemented insulation testing, but we were using different equipment. It wasn't, as reliable or whatever, and you were still able to
Mhm.
identify some failures. Now, what we were doing was better than doing nothing. So we were
Correct.
definitely making an impact right away, which was fantastic. But I think that's one of the things about this is that it shows that if you think that you're doing insulation testing in your facility and you're educated on it, that's great. But perhaps there's an area that is being missed, or perhaps there's a staff member who didn't get the memo on the continuity or the cable testing and all of that stuff that is somewhat newer and all of that. So lots of stuff that you brought up that's very important. It's not just laparoscopic instruments, but I did want to give you a chance to kind of share some of the highlight results of your study. I know you already used one of them, but what are some of the highlights of the results of your study, considering this went over a span of several years and it's a real landmark study, to be honest. So I wanted to give you a chance to share those results.
Well, being that you came from the OR, I
Mhm.
remember meeting you for the first time, and doing some of this was in that study, but was the survey I had sent out because it wasn't just about the insulation testing and the damage and all that. I really was, because I used to be a past scrub as well,
Mm.
and you used to scrub. And I
Yep.
wanted to ask the question in a survey. So we had sent it out to operating room nurses, but we got 66 responses back, but over 42.24% said yes, they had experienced some type of arcing and malfunction during a procedure. To me, that was eye-opening because I had been doing this study, I had already had seen the numbers, but to get this, I really thought it was going to be like 20% or somewhere around there. But to
Yeah.
be over a little over 40,
Mm.
so to me, that was big. On top of some of
Yep.
these facilities, when I would evaluate one lab choline tray as a whole, 16 of them had 75 to 100% fail rate within the tray. 16 facilities, 16 of them, 16 trays
Yeah.
had that high a percentage fail rate when they were already testing.
Ooh.
So yeah, I mean, that's one of many numbers, which again, definitely watch the webinar because I don't think I'll have enough time to go over all the data in the
Yeah,
podcast,
for real.
but there's a lot of numbers, a lot of results.
Yeah, and I mean, Kevin and I, we've done a podcast on this before. I think with Jahan, where we talked about fires in the OR
Mm,
resulting from like cables and
Yeah.
cords and things like that were not being tested. And
yeah.
all three of us had incidents where we had a fire in our hospital's OR. And,
Yeah.
about half of the people I talked to in the industry have also been through that. So this is not a small problem or an isolated issue. This is something that's widespread, that's happening all over the place, and we're just not paying enough attention to it. But I mean, the results were incredible. I do definitely want people to check that out. But what do you think were some of the contributing factors? What were some of the things that had gone wrong in the testing or in the storage or in the transport process that then caused some of these failures to happen?
There's so many. I think that would take another podcast. Okay, so let me kind of go through literally the big ones that stand out for me. The biggest one was education. There was no initial education, continuing education on even how to use the insulation tester correctly,
Mm,
or it was broken. So they had damaged insulation testers or accessories, or they were lost. They didn't have the right tester, meaning it wasn't sensitive enough to look for pinholes, which are worse than gouges and scratches, even though it's all bad for
mhm,
the patient. Another big one was the repair service. Nobody's monitoring the repair service for quality, and there were so many bad repairs that literally the technicians, because they weren't educated to know what a bad repair job looked like, that was another big part of it. On top of using the right, cleaning brushes, they didn't have the right inspection. So they were doing the right things. They just didn't know they didn't have the right tools to perform that inspection. So they were thinking, hey, everything's good to go. The backup, the famous backup of instruments was huge. It was just thrown. It was too small. The bins were, bad. The bends were damaged, so they were scratching the insulation. Then even the repair bins where they would put the damaged insulated item was also bad. So I don't know, Adam. There's so many. I'm probably missing some really important ones, but geez, two studies to ask me contributing factors. That's two podcasts right there, Adam.
No, I know. Trust me.
No, it's true, and that's actually that's good enough to get people started thinking, really, because you got to think about the entire chain of custody, wherever that insulated instrument, not just lap instrument, wherever that insulated instrument goes, you have to kind of handle it with kid gloves and make sure that it's being taken care of, almost like you would with a flexible endoscope. Those things are 20, 30 to $70,000. So it's a little more obvious to hopefully a little more obvious to take care of them and be nice and gentle to them. But when it comes to rigid instruments like laparoscopic instruments and forceps and all that, we tend to kind of just throw them around, jostle them around. We don't worry about
Yeah.
taking care of them like they're little babies. So that's something that you can look at. You can look at the entire chain of custody. What's happening to those instruments? What's the experience of those instruments like? Are they getting jostled around? Are they just getting thrown into the washer, just mixed in with a bunch of towel clips and other sharp instruments, things like that? So hopefully we're just generating enough of an idea for people to just go back, look at their process, and kind of look at it critically to see if they're really taking care of some of these contributing factors to damage with insulated instruments. Um, with that being said, we are coming up onto the end of the podcast. And before I get into your final thoughts, I just want to make one more mention. For those of you joining on this podcast, please check out the international webinar that Cheron just did. It will be available. It's not always just live. It's always available for in our past webinars section of the Healthmark Academy. So I encourage you to check that out. But Cheron, why don't you leave us with some final thoughts based on the study results that you were sharing in the international webinar today?
Yeah, normally my final thoughts would be, go back and look at your processes and all that, but I'm not going to say that this time. What I'm going to say is what I ended the webinar with, is that the next time that you are testing, and maybe you're questioning why I'm testing, or maybe you're questioning, God, I don't have enough time, and you're thinking about, okay, that's right, I'm doing it for patient safety. I just want people to remember that patient safety can also mean their loved one. It could be
Yep.
them.
Yep.
I'm going to leave that as the final thought.
Yep.
No, and I think that's what people should be focusing on. I think so much of SPD is the grind of it and the data, the things that come up during the day. And I have issues with coworkers and all those things. But everything that we touch in SPD is eventually going to touch a patient. That's such an important message that really needs to, we can't say it enough, really. I mean, the patient is really the most important thing. So, Cheron, thank you so much for doing the webinar. Thank you for doing the podcast here with us today. Thank you,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.